Hmm. I appear to be at a bit of a loss today. I was wondering if you could all help me out with this. So, I usually like to put something next to Barry over here in this general space, like a figurine or something relating to the topic of the video. So today we are discussing the Iron Giant, who is now named Emmet. I'm like Emeth or Emeto in Japanese. It's the Hebrew word for truth. It's relating to golems, because the Iron Giant is like a guardian deity and all that kind of stuff, right? But I just can't get it out of my head that his name is just Emmett, like Dr. Emmett Brown from Back to the Future. So we're just gonna go along with the naming scheme. Like we got the Gorosei, we got Ethan and Peter, now we got Emmett. It's just, all right, just roll with it. But unfortunately, I do not have a figure of the Iron Giant. I should probably buy one, like the actual Iron Giant from the movie The Iron Giant. I could use that as a stand-in. But until then, I was wondering if we could just go Dora the Explorer with this. Do you see anything in my room that I could use as a stand-in for the Iron Giant? Anything at all? Anything? Barry doesn't count. He's already there. Sorry, yeah. But he is a good guardian deity. Oh, Pomni. Now, I don't think Pomni is a giant robot. Good choice, though. Keep trying. Keep trying. You can do this. Oh, Exodia the Forbidden One? Yeah, that's a good choice. Let's use Exodia the Forbidden One. I knew you could do it. Good job, everybody. Alright, so in the last chapter, chapter 1119, we had the Iron Giant Emmet emerge from under the ocean, powered up and rearing to go, and just boom! Deck top man Warkery right in the schnoz, right in the tusk. Alright, and it knocks off a big chunk of the tusk, and as it's doing that, it's thinking back to the time when Joy Boy gave it some kind of order. It was like, Emmet, the time is approaching, and Emmet is like, the time? What is the time, Joy Boy? I don't wear a watch, Joy Boy. You never gave me a watch. What is the time, right? And that was the end of the chapter, and it was just like, okay, so the Iron Giant is moving, and it's doing stuff, and it's punching Gorosei, and that's really awesome. But more specifically, today, I want to talk about the incident from 200 years ago, because, the big question that's been circulating around for a while now is, okay, we know that the Iron Giant is powered through the Drums of Liberation, through Luffy specifically going into Gear 5th, okay? When Luffy goes into Gear 5th and is jumping around and is doing his Toon Force shenanigans, the Iron Giant is beginning to get a power-up, like it's like on a wireless charger or something like that, right? And it's very important to keep in mind that Vegapunk, the greatest scientist in the entire world, has had this thing in his junkyard for a while. He's been studying this huge giant from the Void Century that is technologically advanced beyond even kind of the stuff he can do, right? He's looking at this, and he's studying this with all of his brains. And Vegapunk has a really big brain. He has 6 people and a giant brain to work with, okay? And all this technology, and he cannot figure out how to turn this thing on. He does not understand. Like, I'm researching all these different power sources, and, like, nothing is working on this thing. Just cut to the montage of Vegapunk, like, hooking up the Iron Giant to, like, a car battery or something. Like, does this work? No. And it cuts to, like, wind power. Like, he attaches a bunch of windmills to it. Like, does this work? It's like, no. Cut to, like, geothermal energy. Does this work? It's like, nothing's working. Nothing's powering this thing up, all right? Luffy going Gear 5th, and then by extension, when Bonnie was accessing the power, I think also gave it a little bit of a power boost, although, as we saw in the last chapter, Bonnie was not able to maintain that form for very long, right? But both of them going into the power at the same time, I think, jolted that thing awake enough for it to be like, oh, wait, oh, that's the good power, that's that good energy, let's go. It just rises out of the water and just like, I'm ready to fight, and just punches Top Man, all right? Cool. So, the question is, how did it power on 200 years ago when it attacked Marie Geoise? Because when the thing was first revealed, that's what Vegapunk said. 200 years ago, this giant appeared out of nowhere. We're going to get back to that in a minute. Seemingly appeared out of nowhere and started to march through Marie Geoise and started attacking it. Now, he says there wasn't that much damage ultimately that was done. Like, the Iron Giant didn't really kill anybody. He shows up, he goes to attack, and then he powers down. He's just like, whoa! And then everyone's, like, freaking out over it, like, okay. and then I guess they just shoved it over the side of the red line, and it ended up eventually at Egghead Island. It eventually ended up in the trash heap, and Vegapunk was studying the thing, right? I think originally the Gorosei ordered it to be destroyed, and it didn't, because, like, I think Vegapunk says, like, the scientists of that era, because there were always, like, men of science, right? They're like, well, this thing is clearly technologically advanced beyond our era at this point 200 years ago, so we can't destroy it. So they kind of, like, hid it away from the government, and eventually it was, like, Vegapunk kind of inherited it from his, like, his predecessors kind of thing, right? Okay. And the initial idea, and the one I had for a long time, was just like, well, clearly somebody that had Luffy's devil fruit back then, right? Somebody had the Hito Hito no Mi model sun god back then, 200 years ago. We've already confirmed that people have had the fruit, you know, since Joy Boy. It wasn't like Joy Boy and then nobody had it until Luffy. People had the power in the intermediate time from, you know, 900 years ago all the way up to the present day. But the Gorosei specifically mention no one's been able to awaken the thing, to the point where, yeah, they were always looking for it. They could never really get their hands on it, but they were kind of like not really super worried, because it's like, it's been like 800 something years and not a single person has awakened to the same power of the sun god like Joy Boy was able to. So they were just kind of like, it's probably never going to happen. You know, it's been 800 years, no one's activated it, so not a big deal. So the conclusion I arrived at, and the conclusion a lot of people arrived at, was like, well, therefore, they must have just been wrong. The Gorosei are clearly not, like, omniscient. You know, they clearly don't know access to, like, every piece of information. If they would have known that, then they would have probably gotten their hands on the fruit by now, right? So, and there's things that you could clearly do one up over on the Gorosei. Like, Vegapunk was able to do the whole thing with the message and, you know, go behind their back. You know, Saturn wasn't aware of all this. So, they're not able to read minds. They're not able to, like, know things. You know, it's just, they're really strong, and they can recover, and they can heal and stuff like that, but they clearly have limits with their powers, right? So the Gorosei must have been mistaken, and then somebody activated the power. Or, because we saw Bonnie using the abilities of the Toshi Toshi no Mi going into the sun god form, perhaps there was another member, another user of the Toshi Toshi no Mi back then that did the same thing that Bonnie did. You know, like somebody had the power of the Age fruit, and they were like, give me a future where I am the most free, and they just became the sun god. And they were dancing around and everything like that, and that powered up the Iron Giant, and it climbed up the red line and attacked Marie Geoise, but then the power went away, and because we see Bonnie can only stay in that form for a little while, right? Okay, so when I was doing a stream the other day, I saw some other ideas relating to this, and these ideas made a lot of sense, like a tremendous amount of sense, especially when I went back and I looked at the anime episode where the Iron Giant shows up, when Vegapunk is talking about that story, and we have like a little flashback to the Iron Giant arriving in Marie Geoise. Couple of things to bring up. Vegapunk mentions the Iron Giant just appeared out of nowhere 200 years ago. He never actually said it climbed up the red line. That was something you make like an inference from, because, like, well, number one, like, Fisher Tiger climbed up the red line, so it's like, oh, and then Kuma was climbing up the red line, so it's like you infer that, like, the Iron Giant did the exact same thing. We never see the Iron Giant climbing up the red line. In fact, if you go back and check out the episode, I think it was episode 1098, where the flashback is shown, the Iron Giant just literally appears in Marie Geoise. Like, that you see Marie Geoise, and then a big cloud of smoke appears, and then the Iron Giant is just there, holding like a monk's spade weapon, like a big staff weapon that has like a blade on the end of it in the shape of a fan. You know, I actually forgot the name of that weapon. I was trying to find out the name of that, and I actually ended up remembering like Ikaku Madarame from Bleach. His Bankai has a weapon that's in that same shape. So I looked up Ikaku's Bankai, and I was like, oh, it's a Shaolin spade, or like a monk's spade. I'm like, oh, that's what the name of it is, right? So he was wielding something like this, right? So he's like, he just appears out of nowhere. Destroy, and then he immediately powers down. So some of the comments I got were, hey, what if Toki just sent the Iron Giant into the future? I'm gonna go with that one now, because that one makes the most sense, honestly. Yeah, let's go with that. Toki uses her power, because Toki was alive during the Void Century. She actually knew quite a bit about the Void Century, given the fact she was born during it. She was born 830 years ago, right in the middle of it, which is also very important to bring up. like the war that occurred. I mean, the war is, I guess, technically still ongoing because Vegapunk said it was, but like 900 years ago to 800 years ago, that is 100 year of a time gap. So I don't even know if like Joy Boy, was Joy Boy living that entire 100 years? Did Joy Boy show up like did the battle get started by other people and then Joy Boy inherited the battle or something like that? It could have been, because 100 years is a really long time. Toki wasn't born until like 830 years ago. So this was like 70 years into the Void Century when Toki finally showed up. So it's very possible that the war could have been raging for well over like 50 or 60 years by the time the key players of the war, like Joy Boy and Toki, were born, and then they grew up in the middle of this war going on with the Allied forces and the Ancient Kingdom, and they're the ones that were attempting to end the war. You know, kind of like an Avatar kind of situation, like the 100-Year War with the Fire Nation. You know, it's like, we will be the ones to finally end it. You know, that kind of stuff. It might have been something like that. Well, anyway, Toki obviously has the power of the Toki no Mi. Wonder if that had something to do with anything. The fact that she has the power and her name is Toki, I feel like her family was, because she was part of the Amatsuki family. She was born in Wano, and she had the power probably maybe like passed down from like family member to family member, like, oh, this is the new Toki, and she will be the recipient of the Toki no Mi and have the time power and all that crap, right? So she has the ability to transport people into the future, only to the future, herself and other people. She can't go back to the past. She specifically says that's not happening. I don't think we're going to do any time travel shenanigans back to the Void Century, like Luffy's going to meet Joy Boy or something like that. You know, we'll leave the time travel plot lines to the Rainbow Mist filler arc, and it'll stay there, okay? So Toki might have just used the power and sent the Iron Giant into the future. But the thing is, she doesn't know, like, what's going on in the future. She could send herself a whatever increment into the future she wants to. She could send herself 100 years in the future, 200 years in the future. She could probably aim it pretty well. But she doesn't know what that world's going to be like until she actually gets there. And when you get there, you can't go back. So she can't, like, jump into the future and be like, wow, this sucks, I want to go back. No, she's stuck there now. So you can only keep going forward. It's like that episode of Futurama when the professor invents the time machine that can only move into the future. By the by, that was like one of my favorite episodes of that entire show, and they just go to the end of the universe, and then the universe ends, and it restarts again, right? So anyway, now, one limitation, though, of Toki's power, another limitation, I should say, from the way that we've seen how it works, you can't change location. You could jump into the future, but you're going to be in the same location that you were in the past. So when when Curry Castle was burning down, when Odin's castle was burning down, and she was like, okay, Kinemon, Kanjuro, Raizo, Momonosuke, I'm sending you into the future, and you got to figure out a way to defeat Kaido and everything like that, right? Hiyori's going to stay with me, okay? And so they're like, yes, Miss Toki, we'll do that. And so she sends them into the future. They appear right where they were. They appear in the ruins of Odin Castle 20 years later, and they have to escape Wano, and that sets off, Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so that would indicate this could happen. This could 100% be the case. But Toki would have had to have been on top of the Red Line, in where Marie Geoise would have eventually been built, which is, by the way, 100% possible, because we know the Lunarians lived up there before the events of, the government taking over and establishing the castle, like Castle Pangea. We don't know how long that's been up there. Okay, it's probably not always been up there. I'm assuming that the Lunarians had some kind of city, and the world government, when they took over, kind of built over their city. So maybe they didn't necessarily have Castle Pangea, but they had a similar castle, and then the government just built it up to some crazy proportion. Might have been something like that, right? So it's very likely that this final conflict, took place on top of the Red Line. Marie Geoise didn't exist yet, and the were part of this, and Joy Boy was there, and maybe Zunisho was down there or something like that. Maybe like a whole situation, because the sea level at this point would have been 200 meters lower, actually, so that kind of causes other issues. But anyway, they're up there, and the Iron Giant is up there. Emet is walking around, and what if there was a thing where Joy Boy tells Toki, or Toki has the idea herself, somebody has the idea of just like, hey, why don't we send Emet into the future? Why don't we send Emet into the future, and even if we, as like a fail-safe, so it's like, even if we fail, Emmett might be able to succeed. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they realize, like, the battle was lost. Like, we're gonna lose this. Like, all the Lunarians were, like, dead at this point, and all of Joy Boy's crew was gone, and maybe Joy Boy himself was mortally wounded, and he's like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. It's like, okay, Toki, I need you to send Emmett into the future. And then he might be able to save the day. Even if they win, even if the government wins and takes over, and Eam and the Gorosei are winning or whatever, Emmett could show up and he could stop them. He could take them by surprise, right? And Toki's like, okay, well, how far in the future do we send him? And just like, they just picked a number out of a hat. Like, I don't know, 600 years. Because you don't know. You have no idea what's going to be like. They don't even know if the world government's going to last that long, right? Like, hundreds of years. That's a long, long time. Although, if they were aware that Eam is maybe immortal and the Gorosei, if the Gorosei were around back then, and if Joy Boy and Toki were aware that, like, hey, these Gorosei are kind of immortal, so the world government's probably going to stick around for a little while, right? So they didn't know. They just had to guess, and they just had to be like, all right, well, 600 years. That sounds about right. You know, if the government is still in control, they might not even be in control 600 years from now, in which case, fantastic. But if they are, then Emmett could do something about it, right? And so Toki's like, all right, I'll send him 600 years into the future. Maybe, you know, and I don't know if it was Emmett's own idea to do this, because Emmett is clearly, like, sentient and aware and being able to make decisions and things like that. He has memories and everything like that. So maybe it wasn't his own decision, though. Maybe it seemed like from the logic of the conversation he was recalling in the last chapter, it was like Joy Boy giving him an order, like, it's time to do this or something like that, right? I don't know. So anyway, Toki sends Emmett 600 years into the future, which would be 200 years prior to the events of the story right now. And that makes sense why one day out of the blue, the Tenryubito were just walking around the, you know, Marie Geoise, you know, like, da-da-la-da-la-da-la-da, we're the rulers of the entire world, lump-shush-glubbly-bum. And then all of a sudden, boom! Iron Giant crashes down, like, whoa! And he gets up with the giant monk's spade, and he's like, oh my god, no! They're still here! The government took over! Joy Boy, I'll protect everything! Maybe they were debunking on the idea that the energy source would have lasted longer. Maybe they thought that, like, okay, you know, you're going to get cut off from the energy source of Gear 5th, but maybe you'll get to move for a little while there. And the idea is, like, it didn't last very long at all, like, after being severed from the energy source. So it wasn't that 200 years ago there was an awakened user of the Sun God fruit, and there also wasn't a member of, like, a user of the Toshi Toshi, you know me. So it was not like 200 years ago there was an awakened user of Luffy's fruit, or somebody using Bonnie's fruit, or like the distorted future or anything like that. It was literally like the Iron Giant was powered up with Joy Boy's Gear 5th, and that's where he got the power, and then Toki sent him into the future, and he had the power for, like, it lasted for a little while. It lasted for maybe a few more minutes, but he was cut off from it, because Joy Boy's long gone at this point, and just, oh, it's cold, Joy Boy, I'm cold. And then he just, like, collapses, right? Because we never see him climb up the red line. That was never actually mentioned. Maybe some people thought he did, because that's the only way to get up there. They'd be like, oh, yeah, the Iron Giant, well, nobody saw it climb up the red line, but it had to have climbed up the red line. That's the only way you can get up there. Maybe just appeared, you know, with the time powers, right? So I think that makes way more sense. I think that fits a lot of the issues with, like, how did it get the energy and stuff without introducing a brand new character, like, oh, by the way, here's Luffy's great-great-great-great-grandfather, or Roger's great-great-grandfather, or somebody from 200 years ago that had the power and awakened it. Everybody just kind of forgot, you know? So I think that makes more sense. I'm going to go along with that logic. So thanks to the people that commented that, because that's a good theory. I like that one, right? Now, also remember something big going on 200 years ago, and Robin even brings this up, so Oda is definitely connecting the dots here, like, this is connected, is when Fishman and Merfolk were going through their civil rights era, essentially. Like, they were going through the moment of, like, you know, Fishmen and Merfolk are not just fish. We're thinking. We have emotions just like you know? And they were given a lot of basic rights that, like, humans had up until that point. Because before that, they were just treated as fish, as just animals. You know, and they were hunted and enslaved. And they are still hunted and enslaved, but it was way worse prior, like, to 200 years ago, right? It's still rough now, and that's an uphill battle that they're fighting. But in that era, it was even worse, okay, where they weren't even given, like, the rights of, like, acknowledged as, like, thinking beings, okay? So how does that connect back to the Iron Giant? Well, now that we know more information about the way the world was back in the Void Century and the water level rising, you know, the sea level rising and everything being submerged, the Fishmen and Merfolk would have always kind of known about this. right? This is information that they would just know is like common knowledge. People bring up like, why didn't Jinbei mention this to the Straw Hats or anything? And it's like, there's really no reason for Jinbei to mention like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of lost civilizations at the bottom of the ocean. For one thing, Jinbei would just assume this was common knowledge. You know what I mean? Because every fishman and every merfolk, they live underwater. They would all know about this. They would be like, oh yeah, you guys didn't know that there was a bunch of civilizations under the water? Yeah, that's been the way it has been forever. Like, you know, I learned about that when I was a kid, and my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, like as far back as fishmen and merfolk can remember, there's always been cities and stuff down there. That's commonplace to us. And also remember, a lot of the civilizations at the bottom of the ocean, Fishman Island's not the only one. There's a bunch that down there. Like there's the Goldfish Empire. There's the Catfish Empire. These are places that actually exist. We see them during Hachan's seafloor stroll, like the, Hachan, meeting Kami and Papagoo and everybody, and they're going on these adventures under the water and on the ocean floor. So there's a bunch of civilizations down there, like sea beasts and other, like there's fishmen and merfolk that set up civilizations like outposts outside of Fishman Island, but there's also like a sea cat and a sea dog that was like a policeman, and they all had like their own little like cities and stuff like that down there. So these are probably old civilizations from back during the time before the earth flooded, and they just repurposed them into their own, their own cities and things like that. And then in Jinbei's cover story, Jinbei's solo Night of the Sea journey, we see a whole civilization down there. We see ruins that are brought up to the surface by sea monsters, and there's a poneglyph and everything like that Jinbei eventually gives to Big Mom, and that like ties into some stuff, right? So this is common knowledge to all the fishmen and merfolk. And, things are kind of hectic right now and chaotic. By the way, here's something else. Are the Straw Hats even listening to Vegapunk's message right now? Because they're in the middle of massive wars and fights with the Gorosei. I don't think they're even listening to what's going on right now. Okay? Like that, we're seeing the reaction of everybody else all over the world, but Luffy, Zoro, Jinbei, like they're not listening to this message. They have enough shit on their plate right now, right? So I wonder if after the events of this arc, when they're getting away, they're going to be brought up to speed on like what that message even entailed, okay? Because they don't even know right now. But when they do and things calm down a bit, the Straw Hats are probably going to ask Jinbei, like, Jinbei, is this true? Did the Earth really flood, 200 meters? Like, Luffy probably wouldn't care that much about it, but Robin and Robin and probably, like, Usopp would be interested. Sanji, I could feel, would be interested and be like, it's like, Jinbei, what's going on? And Jinbei would tell them. He's just like, well, I don't know anything about, 200 meters of rising and everything like that, but there's always been, civilizations under the water, And it's like, okay, so, huh. Also, to bring this up, I've always felt that Impel Down, well, now I'm not so sure, but I used to think Impel Down was built with just fishmen and merfolk slavery, like the government enslaved them and forced them to build Impel Down, okay? Which could have definitely been an option. It definitely could have been something that happened, right? Or, because of everything being flooded and all that, it either was a place that existed there beforehand, and the government just repurposed it into a prison, or it could have been a place that the fishmen and merfolk built, but not as, like, slaves. What if they built it as, like, a temple or, like, a holy site or something like that? And then the world flooded and the government took it over, like, no, this is ours now. We're going to turn it into a prison. So that's a whole other, that's a whole other thing with Impel Down and stuff like that. But, it's always been clear that the government has been trying to suppress the fishmen and the merfolk, okay? I imagine they had relatively equal rights before the Allied forces. They were all, like, equal under the sun, okay? Then the war happened with, the Ancient Kingdom and the Allied forces, and all this shit happened, and then the world government won, and I bet as soon as the world government took over, that is when they started suppressing the shit out of the fishmen and the merfolk, and it's like, you are just fish, you are just animals, and nothing more, right? That is when that probably started, because they had more free reign over the world, which is a giant super ocean, than like anybody else did, right? And then the Iron Giant occurred, that incident happened, and at that point is when fishmen and merfolk, like, civil rights began to occur, and they were actually given, like, rights as humanity, okay? So I'm still trying to draw the line exactly from Iron Giant. Like, let's say the Iron Giant was sent into the future and then attacked, and then turned off, and like, how does that connect back to Fishmen exactly? You know what I mean? Unless it could have been a thing where Fishmen were so oppressed, and then the Iron Giant attacks, and maybe some people were like very superstitious or something, and they were like, oh no, this is because we've been mistreating the Fishmen and the Merfolk for so long. This is like the punishment that we have to incur, a giant robot attacking us. And the Tenryubito might have been really superstitious about this. It might have been like, oh, we should probably not treat them that way anymore. I mean, they still ended up treating them like horrible, like they're still Fishmen slaves and stuff like that, like even to this day. But, they were like, oh no, we need to change our ways or something. Like, I'm trying to figure out exactly how it connects back. But the Gorosei, if they were alive during the Void Century, they were definitely alive during 200 years ago when the giant attacked, because we see them all reacting to seeing the giant. Like, is that giant that attacked 200 years ago? Holy shit, I think it is, And they're attacking it, right? And, like Top Man knocked it into the water, and they're all reminiscing about this, right? So what if... for whatever reason, like the Gorosei, like they knew they were there since the Void Century. They were like, oh, okay, maybe they were more afraid of like, well, what if there's more stuff that is going to get sent into the future? Like we can't let our guard down or something like that. So we need to change the structure of how the government works with Fishmen and Merfolk. We'll invite them to Reverie. We'll get a position there so we can kind of know what's going on. Maybe, I don't know really, but let me know down below about that, because that's the one thing I've yet to really not like connect the dots on 100%. But there is certainly a connection, because Oda went out of his way to like have that moment with Robin like 200 years ago. Iron Giant attacks, same time Fishmen and Merfolk got rights. That's something there, right? So anyway, yeah. That's the video. Hope you all enjoyed the journey of Emet the Iron Giant. Oh, there was another comment I really liked. I think it was on the review, where, this person was just bringing up the idea of like how kind of like, oh, it's, Jay and Peter and Ethan, and now the Iron Giant is just named Emmett, might as well just be named Emmett, like, is Joy Boy's name just going to be Carl? And I'm seeing that comment, and I couldn't help but just think of Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It's just Carl is Joy Boy. It's like, oh, I'm freaking tired of this crap. I'm so freaking tired of this freaking yokai, demon, Gorosei monsters. All right. Gear Fifth. I'm ending this tonight. Like fires an energy laser or something. Oh, yeah. So, anyway. Thanks to everybody for your comments. Thanks for supporting the channel and all that. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll be there's a break next week. The break this week coming up for One Piece. So we'll be tackling some other aspects of this, and I want to get some tier list done. I actually have a tier list planned. I have one for best cartoons from Cartoon Network, kind of unrelated to One Piece. But I have another one I want to do that's basically rating all of the characters in Egghead, like in the Egghead arc, and placing them on like a tier list on like most helpful in the arc, or like the biggest star of the arc, and then like kind of just there and kind of like didn't do anything, like, because the Egghead is a really big arc, and then we cut all over the world, and it's like, okay, where does Kobe get placed on like being involved in this, and where does Luffy and Sanji, like, what did Usopp do in this arc? So I'm gonna do probably something like that this week, so look out for that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Techie 101 signing out. Later.